Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to my Premier League predictions for the 2024-25 season. In this video, we are going to be going through my list, going from 20th all the way up until 1st, discussing where I believe every single Premier League team will finish, and then later down the line coming back to this video to discuss what we got wrong, but more importantly, what we got right. Now, without further ado, let's dive right in. These are my 24-25 Premier League predictions. I never like doing this, but in 20th position it is Southampton. And really, I do quite like what Russell Martin has been able to do with Southampton. I just don't quite think that he's got enough in this Southampton side to keep them in the Premier League. While I do think that some of the signings that they've made in Flynn Downs and Hardwood Bellis are very good additions, I just don't quite see the defensive solidity that they've got in their black ranks. And the style of football that they play, while entertaining in the Championship, I think is going to come under some scrutiny and some problems later on in the Premier League. And looking forwards to the top end of the pitch, I do wonder how well Adam Armstrong is going to be able to continue his form going into a Premier League campaign. He struggled in the Premier League previously, and he had 34 goal involvements in the Championship for Southampton last season, the most out of any Southampton player, the closest being Shea Adams following up from that with 20. He's obviously left the club, and the closest one just below that one is actually Adam Armstrong with 12 goal contributions. So if Adam Armstrong is not able to continue his goal scoring form, continue providing goals and assists for Southampton, I do wonder where the goals are going to come from. Brereton Diaz, I think, is a decent player, but is he going to contribute the numbers that Southampton require to keep them in the league? I'm not so sure. So it's a combination of the style of play perhaps not matching up to the league, the defensive aspects not necessarily being there, and a struggling series of players in front of goal that I believe will spell a proper poor season for Southampton, and I think they might be going back down. In 19th position, I've got Leicester City, but not necessarily for the reason that you might think. I actually don't believe that Enzo Maresca leaving the club is a particular problem for Leicester. I actually think that Steve Cooper is a good manager and does have experience with the Premier League, so it's a sensible opportunity for him to be able to keep Leicester up in the division. The problem is that I don't think Leicester's squad is necessarily good enough to be able to compete with the rest of the league. And when you look at some of the attacking metrics that they've actually lost in players that they've had to sell, or even some players that might be getting on a bit, it starts to become a little bit concerning, and I don't think Leicester have replaced them anywhere near as well as they need to. While they have signed for Tarwi, when we look at Leicester going forwards, you've got Jamie Vardy, who's really starting to get on a bit, 36 years old, going on to 37. He had 20 goal contributions for Leicester in the Championship last season. 18 of those were goals. Now, if Jamie Vardy does so happen to start to drop in form, which is completely normal considering his age, Leicester are going to need to try and make up those goals. And they've lost Keenan Drewsbury-Hall, who had 26 goal contributions for them last season as well. I just wonder where the goals are going to come from. I don't necessarily see Leicester being completely defensively resolute. James Justin struggles, Connor Cody, you've got Vestergaard, Wout Thijs. Some of these players are just struggling to really make it in the Premier League, and that's kind of why they got relegated in the first place. I just wonder whether Leicester have the quality, and unfortunately, I don't think they do. I'm ready to revisit them if they start to make some signings, but at the moment, I've got them going down. I really do hope I'm wrong about this, but yes, I do have all of the promoted clubs going down in the same season. Unfortunately, I just don't think Ipswich seem to have the quality that I think they require to be able to really make it in the Premier League. I think they'll give it a massive go. I think their gung-ho approach is going to be so valiant, and I do think that Kieran McKenna is going to start to adapt and blend things together. I just fear it might be a little bit too late, and perhaps some of the ownership on some of the players might be a little bit too great. The weight might be a little bit too heavy. Liam Delap, you're looking at Connor Chaplin, you're looking at Amari Hutchinson. These are young players, especially in Hutchinson's case, and the ask for them to carry Ipswich through and keep them into the Premier League might be a bit much. I'm worried about their midfield dynamics. I think it looks a little bit bit out of shape, and I don't think they cover ground as well as they possibly need to, so they're going to be conceding quite a few goals. And in fact, they scored 92 in the Premier League last year, but they actually overperformed their XG by 18 goals. In the Premier League, you're not going to get that kind of allowance, and you're going to see that tally really start to drop. And then when you're looking at goals against, yes, they conceded 10 more goals than they were expected to, but that might end up getting a little bit worse in the Premier League as well. Compound all of that together, and I do think Ipswich are going to struggle. In certain scenarios, I think they'll really give teams a run for their money. Their home form is going to need to be crucial, but in the end, and at the end of the day, I do feel like it might be a little bit too much of a task for Kieran McKenna and his boys. Like I said though, I hope I'm wrong. In 17th, I've got Nottingham Forest, very close to the drop zone. I know they got closer last year because of the points deduction, but I do think they're going to struggle this year. And while we are seeing some additions in the terms of Elliot Anderson, I still don't think their midfield is going to be completely really robust. They struggled to really maintain a midfield defensive balance last season, and I don't think Anderson necessarily changes all too much. They're still going to be looking towards that front line of attackers in Alanga, in Hudson-Odoi, in Awonyi, and of course Morgan Gibbs-White. Of course, Morgan Gibbs-White is going to be the player they really look towards, the creative aspect. I like Hudson-Odoi and I do like Alanga. So if they're able to really kick on and make sure that they're able to stick together, really create those chances, I think Nottingham Forest should have enough. But Nuno Espirito Santo is really going to be on the edge, I think. With the ownership group that are currently there, I can't see Nuno Espirito Santo staying towards the end of the season. I don't think he makes the full campaign, but I do think Nottingham Forest just, and I do mean just, stay in the Premier League. It's going to be a close one, but I think they make it out in 17th. And in 16th position, we have Fulham. Now, while I do think that they've made some good business in signing Emil Smith-Rowe, I think he could be a really good addition to Fulham, by the way. His creativity, his ability to drive and dribble with the ball is very good. However, I think they're seriously going to miss Palhinha. It cannot go overstated how good of a player he was for Fulham from a defensive point of view. Yes, he might not have got the flashy passes. Yes, he might not have really caught the eye. But from a defensive point of view, he's invaluable. 5.07 tackles per 90, 1.53 interceptions, 1.9 blocks. He was everywhere from a defensive point of view, and I think they're really going to miss him. Lukic just doesn't do the same. In comparison, Palhinha actually had 5.07 tackles per 90. Lukic has around 1.7. Now, that is a huge difference, and with the way that Fulham are looking to set up with Pereira and Smith-Rowe going forwards, I think they're going to be left a little bit open. They've also lost Adarabioyo on a free transfer, and I don't think they've necessarily replaced him all too well. They're looking at players, but they haven't had anyone come through the door just yet. Muniz looks good, and I think he's a decent striker. So is Jimenez, and they do have some decent quality in terms of Iwobi and Adama Traore. I just wonder whether they're actually going to have enough going forwards, but more importantly defensively in that midfield area. I think they're going to be found out on occasion, and it's because of that I think they're going to drop down the table just a little bit. Nowhere near relegation really, but they are going to struggle just that little bit. Fulham are in 16th. In 15th position, I've actually got Bournemouth, and that might come as a surprise to some people because Bournemouth actually did really well last season. I've dropped them down a couple of places for some reasons I'm going to bring up in just a moment, but I really like Bournemouth. I think Andoni Iraola has done a sensational job with them. However, I do think they might be found out in certain occasions. Sometimes the quality isn't always there, and while they do have Højsund come into the side from Juventus, while they do have Tyler Adams come back from injury, Alex Scott, they've got a really good front forward-thinking players in Sinisterra, in the likes of Ouattara, who can also do a defensive option. Semenyo is really good as well. You've got, obviously, Kluivert, but, and it is a pretty big problem, they have lost Dominic Solanke, and I would have had Bournemouth so much higher had they kept Dominic Solanke, because 19 goals in his last Premier League season with Bournemouth is nothing short of sensational. A brilliant campaign. You can completely understand why Bournemouth cashed in on him for the amount that they did. But the next highest scorer for Bournemouth had 8 goals, and that is a massive drop-off. with some of the defensive frailties that they've got and with some of the real finishing problems they've got, I do wonder how well Bournemouth could do. I don't think they're going to be anywhere near relegation, and I think Antonio Raiola will find a replacement. It's just about that replacement bedding in, and I just wonder whether that's going to take a little bit too long for them to really climb the table and go up. I think it's going to be a bit of a season where Bournemouth acclimatised to the new way that they're starting to play and allow teams to really get into them. And while that is happening, I do think they're going to get better, but I do think it's going to take some time. So Bournemouth for me are in 15th. In a cool, steady, calm 14th, I've got Brentford. I do think they're going to be absolutely fine. I've seen some people say that they have a chance of getting relegated. I don't see that at all. I think Thomas Frank is a fantastic manager, and the squad that they've still got is pretty sensational. They were devastated by injuries last season, to the point where they lost Mbomo, they lost Visser, obviously Ivan Toney wasn't there, and they really struggled to really come out on top in a number of scenarios. Watch for that to change this season. I think Thomas Frank is going to have a whole new side to this Brentford lot, and I think they're going to really take some of the Premier League teams by storm. I really still like Norgard. I like Janelt. Of course, you've got Damsgaard to come back into the side. From a defensive point of view, you've still got Pinnock. You've still got Nathan Collins. And I still think they're going to have a load of attacking quality going forwards. And Bomo's going to have a great season. I think Kevin Schade, is going to really kick it on to another level. And you've also got Johan Visser, who has really come to the forefront for Brentford recently. Of course, you've got Jensen as well. I think Brentford have a proper side, and they're going to be competition for every single Premier League outfit. Will they keep Ivan Toney? Will they not? I actually don't think it matters to Brentford all too much, because I think they have the quality up front to be able to deal with the fact that Ivan Toney isn't there now that they've got their players back fit, and I think defensively they look okay. Not going to really pull up any trees. I don't think it's going to be completely crazy. I don't see a top 10 finish, but I definitely don't see them getting relegated, and I think it's going to be a solid Premier League season for them. In 13th position, I've got Everton. Everton were fantastic defensively last season, and I think a lot of people overlooked that with all of the points deductions that they ended up having. I think Sean Dyche's job was somewhat overlooked because they were so close to the relegation zone. Of course, they managed to stay in the Premier League, and that is massive, because I think Everton are really going to kick on to bigger and better things. One problem, though, is the striking department. They still need to fix that. Is Dominic Calvert-Lewin going to be fit? Probably not. Can they rely on Beto? I'm not so sure. Can they rely on Malpai? I'm not so sure. How much of an impact is Ndai going to have? I don't know. What I do know is that they've got a solid defence. They've still got Tarkowski, who's going to have a massive impact. You've got Branthwaite, who's still there, who's going to really be key. Keeping him was massive. And of course, you've got the signing of O'Brien, who I think could be one of the signings of the season for how much they paid for him. A real proper player. You've got Irugbunam, who's really going to kick on in that midfield, Doucouré, and you've got Idrissa Gana Gueye. I just think that Everton have enough to be defensively solid once more. I think they're going to struggle to score some goals, but it's going to be that defensive solidity that I think is going to keep them in and around 13th, maybe a little bit higher. I hope they sign a striker. I'd like them to be really a little bit more ambitious, but if they're not, they're going to be steady, they're going to be stable, and they're going to be a solid 13th. In 12th position, it might be a surprise. I've actually got Crystal Palace. Like many others, I saw what Oliver Glasner was doing with Crystal Palace towards the end of last season. So much so that I think other teams will have as well, and will have Crystal Palace's name and number. And I do think that they're really going to watch out for them. So much so that I think Palace might struggle. I think teams are really going to look at the way they play and almost try to find a breakthrough against them, find some kind of weakness and problem. I do think the Crystal Palace are going to need to be on their toes, really sharp. They've obviously lost Michael Olise, and that is a massive loss. If they lose Eze, I can really see them start to drop just a little bit more. They've signed Ismail Assar, who is extremely inconsistent, but watch for him to be really entertaining. Not necessarily with the major outputs, but on the ball, he's just going to be sensational. Now, when we talk about their centre-backs, I think that's a really, really important thing, because Joachim Andersen and Mark Gahey have been subject to bids. If they lose both of them, I can see Palace dropping a little bit further. If they keep them, they could even be a little bit higher. I'm expecting them to lose one of them and stay in and around this 12th position. Adam Wharton, for me, is fantastic, and I'm surprised that not many other teams are looking at him. He is brilliant, and Palace's 3-4-3 system is something that I think is going to cause a number of teams problems. But you still need to make sure that Mateta is scoring goals. You still need to make sure that Edouard is scoring goals. And I just have a feeling that teams are going to have Crystal Palace's number. They're going to be far more aware to what they're doing, and they're going to want to try and stop them more than they have previously, which is why I've got Crystal Palace in a quite modest 12. In 11th, I've got Wolverhampton Wanderers. Wolves are a really interesting side. Not only do they start to play good football now, but they're really starting to come together under Gary O'Neill as a proper team that's going to give every single side a game. They do have a couple of issues though. They've lost Max Kilman and they've also lost Pedro Neto. Now Pedro Neto isn't too big of a worry for me. I do think they have some attacking options, which we'll get to in just a moment. But Max Kilman is the big one for me. Defensively, I do think Wolves are somewhat lacking. While I do like Craig Dawson and I do like Santiago Bueno, Dawson is a little bit old. And while Totti Gomez is a very good player, I just wonder whether they have enough defensive cover at the back to make sure that they're not conceding too many chances. And speaking of conceding too many chances, when you look at Wolves' expected goals against, they actually conceded 11 goals fewer than they should have done. So they did ride their luck at times from a defensive point of view. They need to fix the Kilman issue before they get too deep into the season. If they don't, I fear that some of the goals might come across and it might be a little bit difficult for them. As for going forwards, I really like Rodrigo Gomes out on the right hand side. Proper young, exciting talent, exciting winger who I think could be a really good almost replacement for Pedro Neto. And if you want a player to watch, I think their new right back in Pedro Lima is a player to really look out for. Again, young, exciting, overlapping, underlapping is really high quality. And then you're looking at some of the attacking players. You've got Hwang, you've got Gomes, you've got Guedes, you've got Cunha, Sarabia. Wolves have some attacking talent, and they also have some other players coming forwards as well. Aït-Nouri, of course, down that left-hand side. I think they've got a lot to offer. And so I've got them in the 11th, a conservative 11th, but they could get higher. I did have them in my top 10 for a little bit, but they haven't managed to be able to replace Kilman yet, and Neto is going to be a big miss. They can replace those two players. I can see a top 10 finish for the Wanderers. In 10th position, I've got Brighton and Hove Albion. After losing Roberto De Zerbi, they've brought in the youngest manager in Premier League history in Fabian Hürzeler. Now, he has a number of different coaching tactics and coaching styles, and some of them are somewhat dubious when it comes to their defensive stability. And I do think on occasion you're going to see the likes of Lewis Dunk, you're going to see the likes of Joel Veltman be exposed on certain occasions. I think Van Heck is also going to find it difficult in certain occasions, but going forwards, Brighton are going to be entertaining. And it's through their transfer business that I think some of the most exciting signings have come through. So you've got Mats Wiefer from Feyenoord. He is going to be that metronomic player that we know Pascal Gross was, who is going to be a massive miss for Brighton. And I do think they're going to really miss his tempo, his presence, and his ability on and off the ball. But one player that I'm extremely excited about is Yankuba Minter. I had him pegged down for a brilliant move over to Liverpool, but sadly he did not make it, and that is to Brighton's gain. Newcastle had to sell him, Brighton managed to pick him up, and I think by the end of the season you're going to see nearly every single top Premier League club wanting Yankuba Minter from Brighton. I think he's going to be that next huge signing from Brighton, because we know they are fantastic at selling the players that they're able to progress forwards. Mark my words, guys, Yankuba Minter is going to take the Premier League by storm, and Brighton are going to have a pretty good season themselves. I see them finishing a solid 10th. It's going to be interesting to see how Hürzeler plays out. I think his tactics are going to be absolutely fine, but they're not going to hit the heady heights that we know that Brighton can go. They're really comfortably mid-table, the bottom, or the top of the bottom half of the table, I should say. They are fantastic, and I can see them doing quite well. Brighton are in 10th. In 9th position, I've got West Ham, perhaps lower than a number of people do, considering West Ham's fantastic transfer business. And speaking of that, if there is ever an award for best transfer window, I'm pretty sure West Ham would get it this season, because some of the signings they've made are absolutely sensational. They've signed Max Kilman, they've signed Todibo, who is one of the most sought-after defenders in the world currently. Juventus had him on their radar, and West Ham have managed to swoop him away. What a coup that is. And of course, they've got Somerville coming through the door, Nicholas Füllkrug. They have a number of talented players coming through, and I do think that Julian Lopetegui is going to have quite a lot to work with. However, with all of this transfer business going on, it does mean that the expectation should be a little bit higher. And unfortunately for West Ham United, I can't really see them any higher than 9th. I do think their left-hand side is still going to struggle a little bit. I think that Cresswell is going to struggle. I think Emerson is okay, but still not exactly the defensive left-back you want him to be. However, going forwards, he's pretty brilliant. They've got Aaron Wan-Bissaka coming through the door as well. He's going to provide some great defensive cover out on that right flank. You've got Mohamed Kudus out on the right-hand side or left, depending on how you want to play him. Their attacking options are pretty impressive. However, if you want a hot take from me, I don't think Füllkrug is going to have the impact that I think a lot of West Ham fans unfortunately want him to have. I think he's going to struggle somewhat, and I think West Ham for large parts of this season are also going to struggle. I think the fluidity in the side is going to struggle, and I just see them levelling out a little bit. I think they'll bring those goals that they concede way down. However, creating those big chances, being that little bit more fluid, I don't think is going to come as naturally as I'm sure a lot of West Ham fans would want. This all means that they finish a cool 9th for me with a great prospect of better things to come. For me, West Ham are 9th, but they're knocking on the door. Before you wonder whether I've lost my mind at the fact that I've put Aston Villa in 8th, bear with me, allow me to explain. While they have made some pretty good signings in Onana, Maatsen, Barkley, Philogene, I am concerned. And I'm concerned for a couple of reasons. Number one, they have signed a load of players, yes, but those players are going to take time to really bed into a squad, and that squad doesn't necessarily have the time to bed in players when they want to be really going for the heady heights of the Premier League. The Champions League is its largest competition that it's ever been, which means more matches than it's ever been, and that means more game time. And Aston Villa are going to need to try and go through this season without too many injuries. On top of that, they've also lost Moussa Diaby and Douglas Luiz, two players that I've heard Aston Villa fans say that they're kind of okay with losing, considering the FFP regulations. Now, while that is the case, Douglas Luiz and Moussa Diaby contributed 14 goal contributions last season each, which means taking that out of the team, you're losing 28 of them. You're also relying on Ollie Watkins to have another sensational campaign where he got a number, and I do mean a number, 25 plus goal contributions. He was a sensation. He was a revelation. But is he going to have the same season? I'm not so sure. Are Aston Villa going to have the same season? Again, I'm not so sure. I still think they struggle from that high line that they like to play, and teams are still figuring that out and managing to play through them. They haven't perfected it yet. And all of this comes together to a side that I think is going to flatter to deceive somewhat. I think they're going to look great. I think they're going to look exciting. But when you look down underneath the layer on top, I wonder whether it's going to take some time for all of it to gel together. I think they're going to have a brilliant campaign in Europe. I think they're going to take a couple of scalps in Europe as well. And that goes for the Premier League as well. I think they're going to really manage to scare and shock a couple of teams. But I do think they're going to come unstuck on certain occasions. And I think that's going to mean that they cost themselves some points. And they're going to drop down ever so slightly. I hope Aston Villa have a fantastic time in Europe, because I do think their Premier League campaign is going to suffer somewhat. It should be a fantastic season, though. I can see them doing some great things and some not so great things. So, for me, they finish in 8th. In 7th position, I've got Manchester United. Now, after last campaign, conceding 58 goals and only scoring 57, they ended last season with a goal difference of -1. So it surely can't get any worse. And in this particular case, it hasn't. It's actually gotten better. They've climbed one place. While I think that the signings of De Ligt coming through, Mashraoui, they've already signed Lenny Yoro, and they've signed Joshua Zirkzee. They're all very good. However, I don't quite think it's enough. I still look at that middle of the park and think, you got to do something there. Casemiro clearly has lost his legs, and unfortunately, that is going to massively hinder the way that teams play against Manchester United. I just don't quite see how they're going to keep a defensive, resolute shape when they have no defensive midfielder in front of them. I think Kobbie Mainoo is going to do as much as he possibly can. I think Garnacho and Rashford and Diallo are going to try, but I do think it's going to possibly be in vain. We've already seen some injuries as well. They had one of the most injury-hit campaigns I think I've ever seen. And already, Lenny Yoro, their new signing, and Rasmus Højlund, their new number 9, have already gotten injured for over a month and a half. It's incredible. And who's to say they're not going to get more injuries? Manchester United have made a number of good signings. I just don't quite think it's enough to really take them up that next level, that next step. And question marks are going to be had around Erik ten Hag and whether he's the man to take them forwards. And we all know that Ineos want their guys. So if it doesn't quite go the way of the Dutchman, you might see a change happen at Old Trafford. I'm not predicting that's what's going to happen, but it wouldn't surprise me considering the absolute shambles Manchester United have been over the last few years. They're 7th for me. I'm desperately trying to keep a straight face while talking about the 6th place team for me in Chelsea, but I just can't because their team is just bonkers. Their transfer strategy is bonkers. Everyone at the club is bonkers. It's just mad to me. The signings that they've made, let's just go through a couple, shall we? They have signed Adarabioyo. They have signed Pedro Neto, Dewsbury Hall, Philip Jorgensen, another goalkeeper. I think they've got 6 at this point. Kellyman from Aston Villa for 22 million euros. It just gets a little bit sillier sometimes. And when you look at their squad and look at how many players they've signed, you like to think that they've learnt something, but I don't think they have. Now, having said all this, and really having said all this, I do think Enzo Maresca is a good coach. I do think he understands how to set a side up. I do think he understands what it takes to really start to get the best out of some of these players. And going forwards, Chelsea are going to be super entertaining to watch, I think. I really do believe that Cole Palmer is going to be able to link with Nkunku, who's going to then be able to link with Pedro Neto, who's going to link with Jackson, and it's going to be fantastic. You've got Caicedo, you've got Enzo. You've got some rotation there. I think in the midfield, they're going to be absolutely fine. Defensively, they look a little bit troublesome, but I do think that's down to what Enzo Maresca is asking of them, and later down the line those inverted fullback roles are then going to transition to be normal fullbacks, and it's all going to be fun. It will take time though, and that time is going to cost Chelsea somewhat, and it's also going to cost them some points. So I don't see them climbing the heady heights of the Premier League, but I do see them finishing pretty strong. In fact, I think Christopher Nkunku is going to have a breakout season for the Premier League, and I think Pedro Neto is going to really make his mark in this Chelsea side. I really like him as a player. And, of course, Cole Palmer is going to have another Cole Palmer season. I don't think he's going to hit the heights that he did last year, but he's still going to be pretty fantastic. I think Chelsea are going to be okay in the long run if they don't decide to sack a manager who ends up doing quite well for them. But who knows? It's Chelsea. They're 6th for me. And in 5th place, and a possible Champions League place I might add, I've got Newcastle United. With no European football, I think Newcastle are going to really push for those Champions League spots yet again. They've got quality, they've got Eddie Howe at the helm still, and he's going to get them back to their defensive ways. Joe Linton, you've got Bruno Guimaraes, you've got Sean Longstaff, and I think they're really going to come to the forefront. Anthony Gordon's going to have another stellar season, and you've got Alexander Isak being able to bang in those goals. I think Newcastle are going to shock a number of people yet again. The doubters for Newcastle, who are really going to think that they're finished, and I really don't think they are. I think they're going to come back better than ever. Sandro Tonali is going to be able to play as well, and they've got some real quality there, especially through Tino Livramento and of course Lewis Hall, who I think are going to start to really bed themselves in to this Newcastle side. But if there was ever a problem that I have with Newcastle, or something that is more of a concern, it's the age and the profile of the squad that they've got currently. So their backup striker in Callum Wilson, who could be potentially replaced, I might add, with the new young Sheffield United lad that they've just signed. Callum Wilson is 32 years old. Almiron is 30 years old. Trippier, 30. Dan Burn, 32. Shah, 32. Dubravka, 35, and Nick Pope is 32 years old. They do have something of an ageing squad, but it's an ageing squad that I think can make one more push before having to make too many more changes. I think Newcastle are going to shock a number of people, and they're going to finish 5th in this Premier League season. In fourth place, we have Tottenham Hotspur. I think Tottenham are going to be really good this season. They've addressed some of the major issues that they had previously in the last campaign, and that is really the squad depth that they had. They brought in Archie Gray to really be a rotation option. He's going to be a fantastic young player, by the way. If you want a player to watch out for Young Player of the Year for next season, it's Archie Gray. I think he's going to be absolutely sensational. He's already shown himself to be versatile in a number of different positions. Right back, he can play in midfield where he's normally quite comfortable. He's just going to be brilliant. But the main issue that they had was striker. I don't think they're particularly happy with Richarlison. I think they need backup in that area, and they've got it in Dominic Solanke. Dominic Solanke is one of the best signings I think Tottenham could have made, and I think they're really going to go to that next level with him in the side. In fact, I go as far as to say that I think Dominic Solanke is going to score at least 15 goals in the Premier League for Tottenham next season, and get around about 20 goal involvements, perhaps even a little bit more. For his first season at Tottenham, I don't think that's too bad. And then you're looking towards those attacking players. They've also signed Lucas Bergvall, who looks really promising in pre-season, and they've just got a really exciting team. Maddison is going to kick it on to the next level. Heung-min Son is still going to be fantastic. You've got the likes of Bentancur being able to come into the side, Papa Matasar still playing there, Basuma, and you've got another season under the belt of Destiny Udogie, one of the big highlights for this Tottenham Hotspur side. And of course, Ange Postecoglou's system is something that really takes a lot of headlines as well. The way he moves his fullbacks into midfield and then packs out that midfield area, allowing for those 1v1 situations down the wings. I think it's going to be a really exciting time for Tottenham Hotspur fans, one that they can really relish and enjoy. I think it's going to be a proper good season for them, and they're going to really kick on towards the Premier League. They might even be an outside shout for the Premier League title, but I think they'll fall off later down the line, but they'll have a really good campaign. Tottenham Hotspur for me are in fourth. We're getting close to the top now, and in third place I've got Liverpool. Now I know a lot of people are pretty unhappy with the fact that Liverpool haven't made any signings this season. However, I wouldn't let that worry you all too much. Well, number one, for the reason that I think Liverpool are going to sign players, but number two, Arne Slot and what he's managing to do with this current group of Liverpool players is extremely impressive. The double pivot is very much on show, and one role in particular that I think is going to take the Premier League by storm is Harvey Elliott in the number 10 role. The way he drifts over to the right-hand channel and then moves over into the centre part, I think is going to be pretty sensational. He's creative, he's now finally been given a free licence, and I think he's the player to watch for Liverpool. Dominic Szoboszlai playing a deeper role, almost acting as a place marker for a new centre defensive midfielder to come in, but it just makes Liverpool so dynamic, so attacking. The late runs from deep, the ability to play long passes while also maintaining a dominant foothold in possession, and then you've got the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold to come into the side. You then also got the likes of Mo Salah starting to find some form. Diogo Jota looks proper good, and you've also got Luis Diaz out on that left-hand side. Liverpool have so much to be excited about, and I think they're going to kick on and really challenge Man City and Arsenal for that Premier League title. I think they've got a title charge on their hands. I don't think they'll win it. I'll just put that out there. I don't think they'll win it. I think they'll fall off towards the latter stages of the season. But I think they will be there or thereabouts come Christmas. And that's possibly quite a hot take. I think they'll have a really good run in the Cup, and I think they'll kick on to bigger and better things. But mark my words, Liverpool are going to have a very good season. Sometimes you see managers leave, iconic managers leave, and the next manager that comes through fails to impress. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think this one is the outlier, and Arne Slot is going to do big things for Liverpool. Mark my words. Liverpool fans, get excited. In second place, I have Manchester City. And it sounds very strange saying that, but I just don't necessarily think that they're as strong as they have been previously. They are so good, and I still think they're going to be one of the best teams out there. Haaland is going to score a bucket load of goals. Kevin De Bruyne is going to get a load of assists, but 5 in a row is a lot. And it's even a lot to ask for from these players. I think Rodri might have something of a drop-off. He's played a lot of football. And then you've got the likes of Savinho, who I think is going to have a good campaign, but maybe not the great campaign that a lot of people think that he's going to have. I still think he's a player to watch, and I still think he'll pull off some fantastic moments. But I just wonder about the consistency of Manchester City. I wonder how well Jack Grealish is going to bounce back. I wonder how Jeremy Doku is going to be faring. And then you're looking to the likes of James McAtee and how well he can integrate himself. One player I would watch, though, Oscar Bob. He is a gem. He is just supreme in the way that he can drive past people. If he can finish his end product, he's going to be a quality talent. Watch out for him. Oscar Bob for Manchester City out on that right-hand side. He can play in a multitude of positions, but he is pretty fantastic. I don't think they're going to replace Julian Alvarez as well as I think they would like to. And all in all, I just think it's going to be a step too far for Man City to win 5 in a row. But hey, what do I know? If anyone can do it, it's Pep Guardiola and this incredible Manchester City side. But I've got them in second. And the team finishing top of the Premier League is Arsenal. Yep, you heard it right. Arsenal are winning the Premier League for me. I think they're going to have too much for this Manchester City side. I think they're going to have too much in the bank when it comes to being defensive. I think they're going to have a bucket load of goals. They scored 91 goals last season, and I think they can get even better with Gabriel Jesus coming back into the side. They're the best from set pieces. I think they're going to have a sensational time defensively. They only conceded 29 goals last season, and I think that's going to get even less. When you look at Ricardo Calafiori coming in at that left back / left centre back role, I think they're going to be really difficult to beat. In fact, I think Arsenal could make a play for that record that Chelsea had of only conceding 15 goals in a season. Mark my words, I think they could go for it because Arsenal's defence is absolutely fantastic. I can't see them conceding too many goals, so if they're ever going to do it, I think it's going to be in this particular one. Arsenal will concede fewer than 15 goals. You heard it here first. I'm not exactly saying that it's going to be the case, but I reckon they could really give it a go. And going forwards, if they manage to get a backup to Bukayo Saka, manage to get one more forward, and sign Mikel Merino like we're expecting them to, I think they're going to have enough quality, strength and depth to have a good Champions League campaign and then still compete for that all-important Premier League title. Trossard is going to have to play his role. Jesus is going to need to play his role. Martinelli and Saka on both wings, Declan Rice being that powerhouse that we know he is, and Thomas Partey is going to need to stay fit. But I believe they will, and I believe they'll come through on top in this Premier League season. Arsenal are my Premier League champions for the 24-25 campaign. And that is it, guys. Those are my predictions for the 24-25 Premier League campaign. But what are your predictions? Let me know your predictions in the comment section below. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're excited for the new Premier League season, because I know I am, and I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, my friends, take care.